It's so vitally important to think about the path to power and the power dynamics, and you are always giving executives and students a call to action to start to think more pragmatically about the issue of power. What really brought you to that work, and why do you have so much conviction around that point of view?
Well, I think two things. Number one, when I began teaching this, which was a long time ago, uh, you could pick up a management or an organizational behavior textbook and look in the index, and the word power was missing. So it was like something, Elizabeth Canner, I think in 1979, in a Harvard Business Review article said power is the organization's last dirty secret. That you could talk about money, that you could talk about sex, but power was something that you nice people didn't talk about. And, as I tell my class, the good news for them is I'm not a nice person. So we'll talk about what needs to be talked about. So if you look at the world, I mean, this has really characterized my career period. You look out, you see things that are substantively important, and then you say, are they being covered? And if they aren't, then you should. I feel I have a responsibility to do something about it. And so that was true with power. I think that's number one. Number two, particularly now after I've taught this class off and on for 41 years, believe it or not. Over the years, I would say Stanford in particular, but maybe the younger generation in general has become much more kumbaya and much more, kind of sweet and positive and whatever. And I don't think that always serves them very well. I don't think you necessarily need to be mean, but you need to understand how the world works so that you do not get shocked and surprised. And so you do not, find yourself losing a job involuntarily because you didn't understand the dynamics going around you. So this has made me even more committed to doing the class. And the classes over the years become extremely popular. So the winter quarter, which we did it on Zoom, of course, because everything is virtual now at Stanford. I had 140 people on my waiting list for each of the two sections of the class, and the class has 68 people in it. So, so the course has become even more popular, even as it's become in some sense more countercultural. So I think, I've my reputation, according to a friend of mine at McKinsey, is as a truth teller, which, by the way, does not always make you popular, as you, of course, would understand.
Indeed. Well, I can see how this idea of being pragmatic and understanding the power dynamic can cost people jobs and also make it possible for them to be promoted and ultimately succeed with their ambitions for an organization. And in a sense, it's a bit agnostic, it sounds, in terms of making judgments about whether these tools and techniques are really attributable to, as you say, kumbaya, or leadership principles that are somehow in alignment with my own value system? Or how is it that you help people, and particularly these executives who are aspiring, think about making the distinction between maybe their own judgments and values and the tools of power?
Well, I think you used exactly the right phrase. The phrase is tools. And, as I say, I have a dear friend named Laura Esserman, is a very famous oncologist and is changing the world of medicine. And I say, the difference between Laura Esserman and a street mugger, they both use knives. They use them for different things. She uses them to excise cancer. The street mugger uses it, obviously, in a different way. So power is a tool. It could be used for good. It could be used for evil. It could be used for ill. It could be used for, to change lives, change organizations, change the world, which is Stanford Business School's motto. So if you're going to change lives, change organizations, and change the world, you're going to need influence. Because the reason why the world is the way it is because people are benefiting from the world as it is. And so if you're going to make change, there's going to be resistance, because many people are going to like things as they are. They're going to like, whatever the systems are as they are. They're going to like the rules, whatever they are. If you make change, you're going to need influence. And so you can use it to, change the world of medicine, as Laura is, or you can use it in my new book, The 7 Rules of Power. I've got an example that makes this point. Many years ago, a friend of mine gave me a book. He's unfortunately deceased. And writes in the book to Jeffrey, I'm sure you would admire this person's, basically path to power, use of the a use of your techniques. And the book was called Raven. It's the story of Jim Jones. And if you read Jim Jones and his path to power in San Francisco before he took everybody down to Guyana and had them all drink Kool-Aid, it's very much, he engaged, he activated the norm of reciprocity by helping people during elections. He mobilized people from the People's Temple to both collect donations and to work on a very important political campaign in 1975. Once his slate of people, which includes the former mayor George Moscone, got elected, he got himself appointed to the Housing Commission. He ingratiated himself with Carlton Goodlett, one of the most powerful African Americans who ran a newspaper in San Francisco. So he basically networked, he created resources, he activated the norm of reciprocity. He did everything that you would learn to do in terms of getting power. Now, of course, he didn't use it always in the best and most positive way. But power is a tool, and it can be used for good, it can be used for ill. And you used another word that triggered something in me, which is judgment. I think, almost every religion, certainly Buddhism, but even, Christianity with Matthew 7, judge not that you be not judged. The Quran says only Allah can judge. We, particularly in today's world where you're asked to make judgments about your customer experience every nanosecond, we are in the habit of making judgment. But if you think about it, judgment is the source. I think Buddhism is correct about this, and the Dalai Lama is correct. Judgment is the source of basically all unhappiness, because you're always comparing what is with what you believe should be. And so to the extent you can let go of some of these judgments, you'll be happier, number one. But number two, oftentimes the world has put on our critical path, the path that we have to traverse to get things done, people that we don't particularly like, or that we don't respect, or don't like and don't respect. But if you say, this is a person who I don't like, I don't think they're moral, I don't think they're ethical, I don't think they're this, that, or the other thing, unless you are a better actor than most people are, the other individual is going to see through that. And if you need to build a positive relationship with that person in order to get stuff done, then you've disadvantaged yourself. So you need, my friend Gary Loveman, who used to run Caesars and then was a senior executive at Aetna, now has got a startup in the healthcare space, came to my class and he said, look, one of the truths of organizational life, it's an uncomfortable truth. You're at Stanford now. You can associate with whoever you want. I like Mark, I want to associate with Mark. Don't like Mark, I don't have to see Mark. When you become a senior executive in an organization, critical relationships have to work. And it's your responsibility to make them work. And it doesn't matter whether I think, Mark is fabulous, or I think Mark is the devil incarnate. If you are in a place in which, because of our job, we're interdependent, this relationship has to work. And so you need, and that's the only judgment you need to make. What are the critical relationships? And then you have to figure out a way to make them work.
The definition that I've heard recently played out with some research that's being done at the University of Pennsylvania in education around collaboration is that it's about facing the organization towards a mutually beneficial outcome. And so if you're going to have that, as you say, you have your own ambitions with your career, and hopefully if they're attached to the organizational outcomes, which is why they've hired you, and perhaps you can maybe live into the ambition of being compensated or even overcompensated for that ambition, it's because you pointed the organization and the team towards that mutually beneficial outcome. And what you're saying is you'll have to calibrate the tools of power and also calibrate your own propensity towards being judgmental to achieve that objective.
I think that's right. And you have to, the world doesn't always put on your path, people that you like or respect. And, we've seen many examples of this. I mean, we've got people who've, been attacked or called to account for all kinds of misbehavior. But as long as they are in a position of power and you have to deal with them, you need to figure out how to make it as productive as possible. Now, as Gary Loveman would say, you can get rid of them, but until you get rid of them, that relationship needs to work. So critical relationships have to work.
When you think of those key tools as you reflect on decades now of helping people who are highly empowered, people who've had a lot of agency over building organizations, what do you feel are would be the short list of the tools that you keep coming back to that are a very realistic way of exercising that longer term organizational power?
So before I answer the question, you used a very interesting word, which I think is a very important word, which is the word agency. One of the things that continually surprises me is how unagentic many very competent, intelligent, charming people are. So one
Yeah.
of the
As a CEO coach, I'm always shocked to see how little agency people will behave with. And it's in a sense why I have a job is rather than being a psychologist or a therapist, I'm a coach. So I want you to have ultimate agency over
That's
that
fine.
next objective.
So no, I figured that would resonate with you. So one of the things first thing I try to do in my class is to have people understand that they have agency and they need to approach things in an agentic fashion, and they shouldn't do things like attribute too much just to the environment. I mean, sometimes I'm accused of blaming the victim, but I'm actually a big believer in blaming the victim in the sense that the only behavior that the victim, in quotes, controls is their own. So, if you face gender or race discrimination, as many of our students do, if you face a world that isn't particularly fair because the world is not a just and fair place, you can wait for the world to change, maybe waiting for a long time, or you can say, this is the world I'm dealt with. How can I be as agentic as possible given the constraints of that world? And take responsibility. And I'm sure this resonates with your coaching work, to take responsibility for doing what you can do in a situation. The situation may not be fair, fine, try to change it. But in the meantime, you have to be responsible. So that's my comment on agency, which I think is a fabulous word. And to the extent that your coaching gets people to be more agentic, that's exactly what most people need, even powerful people. But in terms of tools, I think there aren't that many that are that important. I think the first tool is to build social relationships, networking, which many people are uncomfortable about. But you need to meet people. You particularly need to meet the people who are in your company or in your industry who are critical to your success. You need to build positive relationships with those individuals. You need to know people. And by the way, the research is quite clear that the most useful ties are weak ties. People tend to spend most time with the people that they are close to and are similar to them. Their close friends or their family or the people at work that they work with all the time. And the problem with the people that you're close to is they tend to have the same knowledge and the same contacts that you have. And weak ties, of course, provide you, therefore, non-redundant information and contacts. So you need to network effectively. You need to show up in a powerful way. You need to act and speak with power. You can see this by just looking at, the political campaigns and all of that stuff. I think anger is a stronger emotion than sadness or remorse. There's research that shows that. The thing that I often use in my class is the testimony of Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs and Tony Hayward, at the time the CEO of BP. And if you go look at them, you can do it with the sound off. And you can ask yourself, if you didn't know anything about these people, which one of them is going to have a job in 5 or 6 years, and which one of them isn't going to have a job in 5 or 6 months? There is my colleague and friend Dana Carney at the University of California, Berkeley, has written a couple of review papers, one in the California Management Review and one in a more academic journal on body language. She's writing a book on body language. As you know, as an executive coach, how you show up, how you talk, how you look, how you appear, how you come across is absolutely critical. And I'm sure that that's work that you do in your coaching. And so, that's another tool you need to, and this is, actors, Jack Nicholson or Meryl Streep or whoever your favorite actor is. Chadwick Boseman is unfortunately now deceased. They were not born as great actors. This is a skill that can be learned. And so people can learn that. They can learn networking. A third tool is to figure out how to acquire resources, figure out how to create resources. I wrote a case on a guy named Jason Calacanis, who turned $100,000 into 100 million, literally. And he has done a very good job of building an angel investing ecosystem, of which he sits in the center. He's got Founders University. He's got This Week in Startups, one of the most popular podcasts. He's got Angel University. He runs events, now not so much in person. He ran an event called Launch, which had 15,000 people at it, which cities around the world competed to do. And he has created resources. He's created this whole ecosystem. I mean, he came from a lower middle class background. I tell people he's an overnight success. It's taken 20 years, but he's built these things, podcasts and events and things. So you can create resources. You need to learn how to create resources. And one of the things that I try to teach my Stanford students is that they will not be at Stanford forever. And therefore they need to use the Stanford affiliation while they're there to leverage themselves. And leverage is a word that I use a lot. So I would say, resources, networks, and social relationships, the ability to act and speak with power. And related to all of this is building a strong personal brand. So I have one of the exercises I give everybody to do is I say, spend a little time figuring out how you want to describe yourself in 3 or 4 sentences that is mostly true, doesn't necessarily include everything in your life. You can have a little exaggeration in it if you want, like many brands do, but that brings your experience together with what you want to do. So when I did a case on a guy named Tristan Walker, Jeff Jordan, who was the founder of Open Table and is now partner in Andreessen Horowitz, said, when we decide who to fund, we like to fund people whose life experience and whose background and kind of whatever has gotten them to whatever age they are has made them uniquely qualified to do and to build the organization that they were trying to get funding for. So there's a person organization match. And by the way, this is true even if you're not a founder, as you know, again, from your coaching. You want somebody whose life experience and whose trajectory matches the job that they're in, where there's a good fit. So you need to brand yourself, and then you need to figure out how to disseminate that brand. And I've had, a bunch of students. Tristan Walker was not a student of mine, but he's done it fabulously. You can look up Tristan Walker on Google and see how much publicity he's had even before he graduated from Stanford Business School, which is one of the secrets to his success. And I've had a bunch of students who have done a very good job of branding themselves and getting that brand out and creating, therefore, from the brand, this we talk for Coca-Cola or Tylenol or whatever, we would talk about brand equity. That's true for people, not just for products.
Absolutely. And I think about your description of building that brand and also being able to live into it, show up in a way that is believable for that brand, and so that you could speak and have impact, and then, as you say, be known for that brand positioning. It all suggests some conversations that we all had. When I was going to graduate school at Stanford, everybody was screaming about authentic leadership. And I have to say, it was such a relief to be able to listen to Jeff Pfeffer's position on this topic, and subsequently now Adam Grant's and my friend Herminia Ibarra talking about how, I actually wrote a book called Success Built to Last, which was a sequel to Built to Last, because Jim Collins was a professor at the time. And we were looking at individual leadership as opposed to organizational leadership. And I tell a story of Jimmy Carter, and he was talking about how the world did not want to know about how he lusted after a coworker, that there were many aspects to our authenticity that were, as you say, don't serve you well and aren't even desirable. Could you talk about how to coach us through this idea of distinguishing those parts of the vulnerability that are actually useful and contribute to your character and brand rather than undermine them?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great question. What I say is, I think, authenticity to me is way too self-referential. And the
Mm.
people around you, it's not only that they don't want to hear about your lust or your problems or your whatever. It's that that isn't what they need from you. So, I mean, you may come to work one day and your children have disappointed you, or you're having a fight with your spouse, or you don't feel well, you don't feel energetic or whatever. But you need to look at the people who you are surrounded by, your colleagues and your subordinates, and maybe your boss as well, and say, okay, I feel this way, but what do they need from me today? What kind of performance do they need? What kind of interaction do they need? And I need to provide them not what I feel like, but what they need from me, because that's your responsibility as a leader, to deliver to people kind of what they need. If they need confidence, you need to show up with confidence. If you talk to any entrepreneur, they will tell you that one of the keys to being a successful entrepreneur is the ability to act like you know what you're doing, even if you don't. Because if I show up as an entrepreneur and say, by the way, we've had this reversal, which all organizations have, and I'm clueless, the investors are going to leave, the employees are going to leave, the customers are going to leave, and you're going to be done. So you have to be able to convey that you know what you're doing, to quote Andy Grove, who said, sometimes you need to act as if you know what you're doing, even when you don't. So, because the people around you don't want this uncertainty. They want, okay, we've got these challenges and I have a plan and this is what we're going to do. And, collectively, we're going to figure out what to do or something. So I think you need to be authentic to what the people around you want and need from you, in terms of confidence, or in terms of support, or in terms of whatever. You don't need to be authentic to how you feel at the moment, because that isn't going to be very helpful to the people around you.
One of the things that I find that shows up for me very often when I'm invited to try to help coach Sally or John or Deepa into the corner office, and they say, if she could just adjust, or if he could just work into his dance card this behavior, then she or he would be ready for that leadership role. And one of the most common rants I'll hear from a board or from the existing executive team will be, when we were hiring her, she showed up with such incredible confidence. She dominated the conversation. She knew exactly where to go. He was going to make it happen, and he made it happen in the past. He'd made mistakes and learned from them so he could actually have the kind of organizational growth that we're all looking for. And everybody went, wow, she's shown up. He's here. The super person, that superhero, that iconic figure that you're talking about, can sometimes feel to everyone like, what a sense of relief. They've arrived. They're going to handle this. And then in about 6 months, they'll hire an executive coach saying he doesn't listen to anybody. He doesn't collaborate. He doesn't like the team up. He's the only personality in the room. Could you talk about this confidence and collaboration, the balancing act between when you need to be directive and be the commander that everybody's looking for, and in other cases, as you say, give agency or empowerment to others, because that's where you get the scale?
So I actually have two actors, Bill English and Susie Damilano, who happen to be husband and wife, who founded the thing called the San Francisco Playhouse. And I have them come. This year they did it virtually, and they did it better than I ever expected, but they usually come in person. And one of the exercises I have them teach, practice with the students, is in fact to convey two emotions at the same time. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It's because you want to come in and you want to say, I'm in charge and I need your help. And the two things don't quite correspond. But if you think about acting, if you think about your favorite movie or your favorite TV show or your favorite play, oftentimes actors have to also do that. You have to convey, I'm confident, but I'm sad. because that's our life, right? I'm sure there have been moments where Mark Thompson has been, on the one hand, in charge, but also a little insecure. I'm sure there have been moments in which you felt a combination of enthusiasm, but also sadness, because our lives are multidimensional. And so the
Yeah.
ability, again, these are all skills that can be learned. So the ability to express multiple emotions at the same time is something that actors learn, and that you can learn if you get good coaching or good acting training.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think about how in the work that most of these executives end up doing is that they're very clear and directive about the outcomes, about the overall objectives, the vision, and how that's not negotiable. And yet are willing to accept maybe the 90%. I see this a lot with founders, particularly, who've been mainstreaming a product or a service. They do it 24/7. They've been thinking about it more than anyone else. They might even be the smartest person in the room, but that's not helping because they need to recruit all these other people to that task. And so they need to empower them. How do you think about that distinction in terms of, is it that they're being confident about the outcomes and also about their capacity to come up with objectives, and then confident about you because I know that you're going to have the charter to build the systems for this company? How do you make that distinction in terms of empowering the team?
Well, I think it's partly a means and ends issue.
Mm.
So again, to refer back to Laura Esserman, I think one of the biggest skills that she has, and I think this has been true for Rudy Crew, who used to be New York School's chancellor under Rudy Giuliani, and a bunch of leaders that I've seen, what they are able to convey is that what people thought was impossible is in fact possible. And if you think about people like Elon Musk or even Steve Jobs, that that it is that we can in fact change the U.S. healthcare system. It doesn't have to be such a catastrophe. That we can in fact deliver high quality medical care, as Amir Rubin now does as the CEO of One Medical. We can deliver high quality medical care, but do it in a way that's customer friendly. You don't have to wait forever to see your doctor or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a sense. So they have to be able. I think leaders need to be able to convey the idea that change is possible, because no one is going to sign up. I mean, Don Quixote is a great figure in literature, but to say mark your quixotic is not a compliment. I mean, nobody wants to sign up if they think the enterprise for which they're signing up, or the cause or the plan, is not going to work. So you have to be able to convince people that the future that you imagine is in fact doable, that it's achievable. But how you're going to get there and the strategies and tactics along the way, you need help, you need advice, you need to adjust based upon what you learn. And by the way, the other thing that you need, which is I think a skill that is highly undervalued, but not by you, because I think you value this a lot: persistence and resilience. I'm sure you are doing a lot of coaching with your executives about surmounting setbacks, because there is no career that doesn't have a setback. Willie Brown, the two-time mayor of San Francisco and the longest-serving member of the California Assembly, lost his first election for the Assembly, lost his first time he ran for Speaker of the Assembly. Reed Hastings, before he became CEO of Netflix, ran another organization where twice he told the board that they should replace him because he was doing such a crummy job. I mean, there is no career. And certainly if you're trying to tackle big things, you're going to have setbacks and opposition. And so this idea of persistence and resilience, and building persistence and resilience into you and just keeping at it, is, I think, really a critical skill.
Well, thank you for that. I think that the fact that you've been able to give people tools, such accomplished people at all levels of their career, a sense of clarity about what it means to take the paths to power and then have impact. I think about that message that you're sending, and how we might think in some cases when we do have a setback, we say, what can I do? And then I listen to Jeff Pfeffer and I think, what can I do? What is possible? How do I come back at this?
When I look at the people who are succeeding, they basically they basically follow my second rule of power, which is they get out of their own way. To get out of your own way, you need to lose all of the scripts that are holding you back. And I'll give you an example, which is my favorite example. So a woman comes to see me. She's an Asian woman from a Taiwanese background. She's working for one of these iconic Silicon Valley companies. She's run a marketing analytics project that's made the company $4 million. And she reports to a male boss with much more seniority in the company and much older. She has 3 male peers who have much more seniority in the company, and they're much older. So she comes to see me. One of her peers has gone to their mutual boss and said, I want Christine to report to me. Very clever move, because then he's going to get credit for all her work and also take out a competitor. So she says, what should I do? And I said, well, I don't know what you should do. We'll talk about that in a minute. I said, but you've been here in this office for 10 minutes, and I keep hearing about how you're the youngest person and the person with the least seniority and the only woman. And I said, I'm sure those 3 descriptions are correct. Let me give you 3 other descriptions. You are the smartest, because she had worked at McKinsey before she came back to Stanford. You're the most analytically skilled. You're the only person there with a degree from a fancy university. And I said, and you've run the project that's made the most money. And she sat up a little straighter and she said, that's correct. I said, okay, we've got a bunch of adjectives. You pick which ones. Some adjectives will disempower you. They shouldn't, but they will. And some adjectives will empower you. You go into situations, you need to go in with adjectives that think, that make you feel powerful. Just because other people say, you need to be X and Y, you don't have to accept that. And the most successful people I know have not accepted people's definitions of them that limit what they can do or who they can become. And this has to be completely consistent with the kind of coaching that you do.
Exactly. I'm here, full applause, standing ovation. I actually am standing at this moment. I couldn't sit down talking to you, Jeff. Thank you so much. This is the message I think we all need to hear about getting out of our own way. And you've been evangelizing that message of self-awareness and contribution for decades. And thank you for the contribution that you're making and that you're continuing to have impact on the lives of people who really do have a lot of agency in making a difference.
Thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you.